I paid for every flower, every chair, every reservation, and every detail of that party. Then I learned I was not welcome to attend. My name is Helen Parker. I am 69 years old, and until recently I believed that if you loved your family enough, everything would eventually work out. I believed kindness mattered. I believed generosity mattered. Most of all, I believed that family remembered who stood beside them when they needed help. Looking back now, I realize how dangerous those assumptions can be. It started with my granddaughter Lily. She was about to turn 16, and anyone who has ever loved a teenage girl knows how important that birthday can feel. Lily was a wonderful child. Smart, kind, curious about the world. Ever since she was little, we had shared a special bond. We baked cookies together. We watched old movies together. She called me every Sunday afternoon just to tell me about school and her friends. So when my son Daniel mentioned that money was tight and they were struggling to plan the sweet 16 celebration Lily had dreamed about for years, I did not hesitate. I told him I would help. 1 week later, helping turned into paying for almost everything. The venue, the decorations, the catering, the photographer, the music. I did not mind. Seeing Lily happy felt worth every dollar. For months, I worked alongside everyone else preparing for the event. I spent evenings reviewing menu options. I met with vendors. I approved floral arrangements. I even helped choose the colors for the ballroom decorations. The venue overlooked a beautiful lake about 20 miles outside town. Lily loved the location the moment she saw it. Her smile made every effort worthwhile. During those months, my daughter-in-law Vanessa always seemed grateful. She thanked me repeatedly. She told relatives how generous I had been. She called me a blessing to the family. Looking back, I can still hear those words. That is what makes everything that happened afterward feel so strange. About 3 weeks before the party, I noticed something changing. Small things at first. Conversations stopped when I entered the room. Planning meetings happened without me. Questions I normally received suddenly went unanswered. Whenever I asked Vanessa about details, she smiled politely and said everything was under control. I told myself not to overthink it. After all, the party was for Lily, not for me. Then one afternoon, I drove home from a meeting with the florist feeling unusually happy. The centerpieces had finally been approved. The ballroom was going to look beautiful. I remember placing the paperwork on my kitchen table and pouring myself a cup of coffee. The sunlight streamed through the windows. Everything felt peaceful. My phone buzzed with a message from Lily. She thanked me again for helping create her dream celebration. I smiled as I read her words. At that moment, I truly believed the entire family was working toward the same goal. I believed we were all on the same side. What I did not know was that while I was paying invoices, signing contracts, and helping build the event, Vanessa was making decisions I knew nothing about. Decisions that would soon change everything. If someone had told me then that the woman thanking me for funding the celebration was also quietly pushing me out of it, I would never have believed them. But the truth has a way of revealing itself eventually. And when it finally did, I discovered that the most expensive part of that party was not the money I spent. It was the lesson it taught me about the people I trusted most. The first sign appeared 6 days later. I was organizing receipts and vendor confirmations when my phone rang. The caller ID showed the name of the event coordinator from the venue. We had spoken several times during the planning process, so I answered without hesitation. Her voice sounded friendly at first, but there was a trace of uncertainty beneath it. She explained that she was reviewing final attendance numbers and needed clarification about a recent update. I asked what kind of update. There was a brief pause. Then she said something that made me set down my coffee cup. "We received a revised guest list," she explained. I just wanted to confirm that everything was accurate. I frowned. What exactly needs confirmation? Another pause. "Your name is no longer included." For a moment, I thought I had misunderstood her. The words seemed too strange to process. I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, because it felt impossible. "I think there must be some mistake," I said. "I am the grandmother." The coordinator sounded relieved. That is what I thought. Which is why I called. My stomach tightened. She quickly clarified that she was not supposed to discuss internal changes, but the revision had seemed unusual given my involvement in the planning. She apologized if she had overstepped. I assured her she had done nothing wrong and ended the call. Then I sat motionless at my kitchen table. The room felt suddenly quiet. Too quiet. I opened the folder containing all the party documents. Contracts. Deposits. Seating plans. Vendor agreements. My name appeared everywhere. Yet according to the venue, I was no longer invited. I checked my phone. No messages. No explanations. Nothing. That evening I called Daniel. I tried to keep my voice calm. I asked if everything was going smoothly with the party. He said yes. I asked if there had been any recent changes. He hesitated before saying not that he knew of. Something about his answer felt uncomfortable, like a person walking carefully across thin ice. I almost asked directly about the guest list. Almost. Instead, I thanked him for the update and ended the call. The next day, I texted Vanessa. I kept the message simple. I asked whether there had been any adjustments to the seating arrangements because the venue had contacted me with a question. Her reply arrived 20 minutes later. Nothing major. Just normal planning details. Everything is under control. Under control. The phrase stayed with me. I read it several times. Not because of what it said. Because of what it did not say. She never mentioned the guest list. She never mentioned the venue call. She never asked what question the coordinator had raised. Most people would have been curious. Vanessa was not. 3 days passed. I tried to convince myself there had been a misunderstanding. Perhaps the coordinator had seen an incomplete list. Perhaps names were being reorganized. Perhaps there was a reasonable explanation. But deep down I already knew something was wrong. Then another small detail surfaced. My sister called one evening to discuss travel plans for the party. During the conversation, she casually mentioned receiving a digital itinerary from Vanessa. I checked my email afterward. Nothing. No itinerary. No update. No schedule. I searched every folder. Still nothing. That was when the uneasy feeling became something more solid. One missing email could be an accident. One strange phone call could be a misunderstanding. But multiple exclusions beginning at the exact same time felt different. They felt intentional. As I sat alone in my living room that night, staring at the stack of party documents on my coffee table, I realized I was no longer asking whether something was happening behind my back. I was asking how much had already happened without me knowing. And for the first time, I began to wonder whether the party I had helped build was slowly becoming a celebration designed to happen without me there at all. The answer arrived when I least expected it. 2 afternoons later, I was reviewing invoices in my home office when my phone rang again. This time it was not the venue coordinator. It was a young woman from the photography company. We had spoken several times while planning the event because Lily cared deeply about the photo package. She wanted a memory book documenting every part of the celebration. The photographer sounded cheerful at first. Then her tone shifted. "Mrs. Parker, I hope you do not mind me asking a quick question." I told her I did not. "We received a request to update the family portrait list," she explained. I just wanted to make sure the information was correct. My heart sank before she even finished the sentence. "What information?" I asked quietly. "The revised instructions indicate that you will not be participating in any family photographs." For several seconds, I could not speak. I stared out the window at the backyard garden I had spent years maintaining. The flowers swayed gently in the afternoon breeze. Everything outside looked peaceful. Inside me, something was beginning to crack. The photographer immediately sensed my reaction. She apologized and explained that she assumed I already knew about the change. I thanked her politely and ended the call. Then I sat there in silence. 2 separate vendors. 2 separate changes. Both involving my exclusion. Both communicated without my knowledge. At that point, denial became impossible. Someone was actively removing me from the event. That evening, Lily called as she often did. She sounded excited. She talked about school, friends, and the dress she planned to wear at the party. I listened carefully. Then she said something that stayed with me long after the conversation ended. "I cannot wait for you to see everything, Grandma. You helped make all of it happen." I closed my eyes. There was genuine happiness in her voice. Genuine love. She clearly believed I would be there. Whatever was happening, Lily was not part of it. That realization brought both relief and sadness. Relief because my granddaughter had not turned against me. Sadness because it meant someone else was making these decisions without her knowledge. The next morning, I drove to the venue under the pretense of checking final decoration samples. The coordinator greeted me warmly and walked me through the ballroom. It looked beautiful. Crystal chandeliers, elegant floral arrangements, soft gold and ivory accents. Everything Lily had dreamed about. As we reviewed details, the coordinator hesitated before speaking. "I probably should not mention this," she said carefully, but I was surprised by the recent instructions. I looked at her. She lowered her voice. The changes came directly from Vanessa. There it was. No misunderstanding. No confusion. No administrative error. A name. A decision. A person. The coordinator quickly changed the subject, clearly uncomfortable. She had already said more than she intended. She did not need to say anything else. The drive home felt longer than usual. I kept replaying the conversation in my head. Vanessa had thanked me, smiled at me, accepted my help, accepted my money, accepted months of planning and effort, all while quietly arranging to remove me from the celebration itself. The betrayal was not loud. It was not dramatic. In some ways that made it worse. It had been deliberate, methodical, careful. When I finally arrived home, I placed every contract and payment record on my dining room table. One by one, I reviewed them. The venue agreement, the catering contract, the photography package, the entertainment reservation. As the papers spread across the table, a different realization began forming. Vanessa had spent months planning my exclusion. What she clearly did not understand was that nearly every major agreement connected to that event still carried one name at the bottom. Mine. That evening I did not call Vanessa. I did not send angry messages. I did not confront Daniel. Years ago, I might have reacted differently. Years ago, I might have demanded explanations and searched for reassurance. But experience teaches you that people reveal far more when they believe their secret is still safe. So I remained silent. The next few days gave me plenty of time to think. I spread every contract across my dining room table and reviewed them carefully. The venue agreement listed me as the primary client. The catering company listed me as the authorized decision-maker. The photographer reported directly to me. Even the entertainment company required my approval for any significant modifications. I had signed everything because Vanessa claimed the planning process would be easier if one person handled the paperwork. At the time, I thought I was helping my family. Now I understood the irony. The very documents she had relied on to build the celebration were also the documents she had failed to consider. Several mornings later, I met my friend Barbara for coffee. We had known each other for more than 30 years. She immediately noticed something was bothering me. I did not share every detail, but I explained enough for her to understand the situation. She listened quietly before asking a simple question. What would happen if you stopped protecting people from the consequences of their own decisions? I stared into my coffee. The question stayed with me long after our conversation ended. For years, I had protected everyone. I protected feelings. I protected appearances. I protected family harmony even when it came at my own expense. Maybe that was part of the reason things had reached this point. When people never face consequences, they often assume there will never be any. 2 days later, another unexpected clue arrived. A relative accidentally forwarded me an email chain discussing seating arrangements. My name appeared nowhere in the final version. Not near the front. Not near the back. Not anywhere. More importantly, several relatives had asked whether I would be attending. Each question received the same response from Vanessa. She claimed I preferred staying home. She claimed large events exhausted me. She claimed I wanted Lily to have the spotlight without distractions. I read those words 3 times. None of them were true. Yet they sounded believable enough to prevent anyone from asking further questions. That realization hurt more than I expected. Vanessa was not merely excluding me. She was rewriting my identity. She was creating a version of me that justified my absence. A quiet grandmother. A distant grandmother. A grandmother who no longer wished to participate. The truth was exactly the opposite. That night I sat on my back porch watching the sunset. The sky glowed orange and gold above the neighborhood rooftops. Somewhere across town, Lily was probably thinking about her party. She had no idea what was happening behind the scenes. She simply trusted the adults around her. I thought about her excitement, her dreams, her happiness. Then I thought about Vanessa, about the lies, about the careful planning, about the months she had spent accepting my support while arranging my removal. For the first time since discovering the truth, I stopped focusing on how hurt I felt. Instead, I focused on the practical reality sitting inside my dining room. Contracts, deposits, authorizations, decisions. Every major piece of the celebration still depended on me. Vanessa believed she had successfully erased me from the event. What she did not realize was that she had built her entire plan on a foundation she did not control. And as I watched the last light disappear beyond the horizon, I made a decision. I would not argue. I would not beg for inclusion. I would simply allow everyone to discover exactly who held the power they had spent months pretending I no longer possessed. The following week became an exercise in patience. Every instinct told me to confront Vanessa and demand an explanation. Every instinct told me to ask Daniel how he could allow something like this to happen. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that neither conversation would change the facts. The facts were already sitting on my dining room table. Vanessa had made her choice. Now I needed to decide what I would do with mine. I spent several days speaking quietly with the companies involved in the event. I did not make any changes. I did not cancel anything. I simply asked questions. I wanted to understand exactly how every agreement worked. The answers were enlightening. The venue manager confirmed that all major approvals required authorization from the individual listed on the contract. The catering company said the same thing. So did the photographer. So did the entertainment company. One after another, each conversation reinforced the same reality. I had not merely contributed money. I was the legal client attached to nearly every major service connected to the celebration. Meanwhile, life continued as though nothing was wrong. Vanessa posted cheerful updates online about the upcoming event. Relatives commented excitedly. Lily counted down the days. Daniel remained strangely quiet. The contrast felt surreal. Everyone seemed focused on the party itself while I was discovering the structure holding the entire event together. Then something happened that removed any remaining doubt. I received an email that had clearly been forwarded by mistake. The sender was a relative helping coordinate guest accommodations. Included in the conversation was a message from Vanessa discussing final arrangements. Most of it involved ordinary planning details. Then I saw a sentence that stopped me cold. Vanessa wrote that it was important to avoid any confusion regarding guest attendance because certain family members tended to make events about themselves. She never mentioned my name directly. She did not need to. Everyone reading the message knew exactly who she meant. I stared at the screen for a long time. Not because I was shocked. By then, shock had faded. What I felt was clarity. Months earlier, I would have searched for another explanation. I would have tried to see things from her perspective. I would have questioned my own instincts. Not anymore. The pattern was too consistent. The evidence was too clear. Later that evening, Lily called again. She was excited about the final decorations and asked whether I thought the lake would look pretty at sunset during photographs. I told her it would be beautiful. As she talked, I realized how completely unaware she remained. Her excitement was genuine. Her trust was genuine. She still believed the adults around her were working together to create something special. I promised myself I would not allow her birthday to become a battlefield. Whatever decisions I made would be directed at the people responsible, not at the young girl who had done nothing wrong. After the call ended, I walked into my dining room and looked once more at the stack of contracts. The paperwork no longer felt like a collection of documents. It felt like a choice. Vanessa believed she had successfully pushed me out of the celebration. She believed I would quietly accept the humiliation and continue funding the event anyway. She believed gratitude was unnecessary because my role had already been reduced to a checkbook. The problem was that she had based her entire plan on one dangerous assumption. She assumed I would keep giving even after discovering the truth. As I gathered the contracts into a single folder and switched off the dining room light, I finally understood the mistake she had made. Vanessa thought she controlled the guest list. What she did not realize was that I still controlled everything else. For the next 10 days, I did absolutely nothing. At least that was how it appeared from the outside. Vanessa continued planning. Daniel continued moving forward as though everything was settled. Relatives discussed travel arrangements. Social media filled with cheerful updates about the upcoming celebration. Meanwhile, I remained quiet. The silence seemed to make everyone more comfortable. The less I said, the more confident they became. That confidence turned out to be very revealing. A few days before the party, I received another call from the venue coordinator. She needed final confirmation on several services. I thanked her and reviewed the details carefully. Then I asked a simple question. If the primary client decides to withdraw authorization, what happens? There was a brief pause before she explained the process. Contracts would need to be reevaluated. Services could be suspended. New financial guarantees would be required. Everything depended on timing and documentation. I thanked her and ended the call. The answer was exactly what I expected. Later that afternoon, Lily stopped by my house after school. She sat at my kitchen table eating chocolate chip cookies while talking excitedly about the celebration. She showed me photographs of her dress and described how she wanted the evening to unfold. Listening to her was both joyful and painful. Joyful because she was genuinely happy. Painful because she still had no idea what had been happening behind the scenes. At one point she smiled and said, "I cannot believe how much work you put into all of this, Grandma." I smiled back. The important thing is that you enjoy your birthday. And I meant it. None of my decisions were about Lily. They never had been. After she left, I sat alone for a long time thinking about the difference between generosity and obligation. For years I had treated them as the same thing. I gave because I loved my family. Somewhere along the way, certain people began treating that generosity as something they were entitled to receive. Once entitlement takes root, gratitude often disappears. The following evening, I attended a small family dinner at a local restaurant. Vanessa was there. So was Daniel. Several relatives joined us as well. The conversation revolved almost entirely around the upcoming event. Vanessa spoke confidently about schedules, decorations, and guest experiences. Everyone listened attentively. Watching her felt strangely educational. She discussed the celebration as though every piece was firmly under her control, as though every outcome had already been secured. Several times she referred to the event as something she had created, something she had built. Each time I simply nodded and remained silent. The less resistance she encountered, the more comfortable she became. By the end of the evening, she seemed completely certain of her position. Driving home that night, I realized something important. Vanessa no longer viewed me as a participant. She viewed me as a resource that had already served its purpose. In her mind, my role ended the moment the checks cleared and the contracts were signed. What she failed to understand was that those contracts still existed. The signatures still existed. The authority still existed. 2 mornings before the party, I organized every document into a single folder and placed it neatly on my desk. Then I made several phone calls. Calm conversations. Professional conversations. Nothing emotional. Nothing dramatic. When the final call ended, I looked out the window at the quiet street beyond my front yard. Across town, Vanessa was probably finalizing decorations and reviewing schedules. She believed the hard work was finished. She believed everything was ready. What she did not know is that the most important decisions had not been made yet. And for the first time since this began, those decisions belonged entirely to me. The morning of the party arrived bright and clear. Sunlight poured through my kitchen windows as I sat quietly with a cup of coffee and looked out at the neighborhood. Across town, preparations were already underway. Tables would be arranged. Flowers would be delivered. Staff members would be moving through the ballroom making final adjustments. For months, I had imagined this day differently. I had imagined arriving early to help Lily get ready. I had imagined seeing her smile when the first guests walked through the doors. Instead, I sat alone knowing exactly what was about to happen. At 8:15 my phone rang. The caller ID displayed the venue. I answered calmly. The coordinator sounded professional but concerned. She informed me that several questions had arisen regarding authorization requirements connected to the event. I thanked her and confirmed the instructions I had provided earlier. Within minutes, additional calls began arriving. The catering company needed clarification. The entertainment company needed clarification. The photography team needed clarification. Each conversation followed the same pattern: professional, respectful, direct. The issue was simple. The individual responsible for the agreements had withdrawn approval for services connected to an event from which she had been deliberately excluded. Nobody raised their voice. Nobody argued. They simply followed the terms of their contracts. By 9:30, the first signs of panic appeared. Daniel called. I let the phone ring twice before answering. His voice sounded strained. Mom, what is happening? I asked what he meant. The venue is saying there are problems with the contracts. Vendors are calling. Vanessa is trying to sort everything out. I remained quiet for a moment. That sounds stressful, I said. Silence followed. Then he asked the question he should have asked weeks earlier. Did you know about this? I looked out the window at the peaceful morning sky. Did you know I was removed from the guest list? Another silence. This one lasted much longer. When Daniel finally spoke, his voice had changed. The confidence was gone. Mom, I think there has been some kind of misunderstanding. No, I replied gently. The misunderstanding was believing I would continue funding an event after being told I was not welcome there. He did not argue. He could not. Less than 20 minutes later, Vanessa called. Then she called again. Then again. I did not answer immediately. When I finally did, her voice sounded completely different from the polished confidence she had displayed for months. She insisted there must be a solution. She explained how much work had gone into the event. She explained how disappointed everyone would be. She explained how important the day was. I listened patiently. Then I asked a single question. If this celebration was so important, why was I not invited? The line went quiet. For the first time since this situation began, Vanessa had no prepared answer. No carefully crafted explanation. No convenient story. Eventually, she muttered something about confusion and miscommunication. I had heard enough. By noon, the reality of the situation had spread through the family. Relatives began calling. Some were confused. Others were angry. Several wanted explanations. Yet the facts remained simple. The contracts existed. The decisions existed. The exclusions existed. And actions have consequences. Throughout the chaos, one person remained on my mind. Lily. She called shortly after lunch. Her voice sounded hurt and confused. Before she could say much, I explained that none of this was her fault. I reminded her how much I loved her. I promised that she would understand everything soon. After the call ended, I sat quietly in my living room. Across town, a celebration that had seemed unstoppable was suddenly unraveling. Vanessa had spent months removing me from the event. What she never considered was that removing the person who built the foundation can sometimes bring the entire structure down with it. By late afternoon, the confusion had turned into something much larger. The family could no longer pretend that nothing had happened. Facts have a way of cutting through carefully constructed stories, and the facts were now impossible to ignore. Around 4 o'clock, Daniel arrived at my house. I opened the front door and immediately saw the exhaustion on his face. He looked like a man who had spent an entire day discovering that the reality around him was very different from what he believed. For several moments, neither of us spoke. Then he stepped inside and sat at the kitchen table, where so many important conversations had taken place over the years. I placed a folder in front of him. Inside were copies of the emails, the contract revisions, the vendor notes, and the communications that documented exactly what had happened. Daniel slowly turned each page. The room remained silent except for the sound of paper moving across the table. The longer he read, the more his expression changed. Confusion became disbelief. Disbelief became disappointment. Finally, he looked up at me. "You knew all of this?" he asked quietly. "For weeks," I replied. He lowered his eyes again. Why did nobody tell me? I wanted to answer immediately, but the truth was not simple. That is a question you should ask yourself, I said gently. Why did nobody think you would notice? The words seemed to land heavily. Daniel leaned back in his chair and stared toward the window. For the first time since this began, I saw him questioning everything. Not just the party. Not just the contracts. Years of assumptions. Years of explanations. Years of stories that had been accepted without investigation. An hour later, several relatives arrived unexpectedly. News had spread quickly throughout the family. Some wanted answers. Others wanted clarity. A few simply wanted to understand how a celebration had collapsed so dramatically. I listened as people discussed the situation. What surprised me most was how many of them admitted they had been told I preferred staying away from family events. Others said they believed I no longer enjoyed large gatherings. Several repeated versions of the same story Vanessa had been sharing for years. Hearing it all together was strangely validating. The pattern was finally visible to everyone, not just me. Then came the moment that changed everything. One relative asked a simple question. If Helen was paying for the event, why was she excluded from it? The room fell completely silent. Nobody had an answer. Not because the answer was complicated. Because there was no reasonable answer at all. The silence lasted several seconds. In that silence, years of excuses seemed to collapse under their own weight. Shortly afterward, Vanessa arrived. She looked tired and frustrated. For the first time since I had known her, she appeared uncertain. The confidence that had carried her through months of planning was gone. She sat down but avoided looking directly at me. The room remained quiet. Eventually, she began speaking about misunderstandings and communication problems. She described confusion. She described mistakes. But every explanation sounded weaker than the one before it. Finally, I asked a single question. Did you ask vendors to remove me from the event? Vanessa froze. Everyone in the room watched her. The answer should have been simple. Yes or no. Instead, she hesitated. That hesitation told the entire family everything they needed to know. No argument followed. No dramatic confrontation. There was no need. Truth had already entered the room. And once everyone could see it clearly, the story Vanessa had spent months building began to fall apart all on its own. As evening settled outside and relatives slowly prepared to leave, I realized something important. The party was never the real issue. The real issue was respect. And for the first time in a very long time, everyone was finally looking at the situation without the filters that had hidden the truth. The weeks that followed were quieter than I expected. After everything that had happened, I thought there would be more arguments, more accusations, more attempts to rewrite the story. Instead, something very different occurred. People began paying attention. Relatives who had accepted certain explanations for years started asking questions. Conversations that once ended with polite assumptions now included uncomfortable honesty. The truth had a way of changing the atmosphere of an entire family. Daniel visited often during those weeks. Sometimes we talked about what happened. Sometimes we talked about ordinary things like weather, work, and home repairs. The important change was that he listened. Really listened. One afternoon, he sat across from me at the kitchen table and admitted he should have noticed the signs much earlier. I did not argue with him. Regret is heavy enough without someone adding more weight to it. What mattered was that he finally saw what had been happening. As for Vanessa, she became noticeably quieter. The confidence that once filled every room seemed to disappear. She remained polite, but the carefully managed image she had relied upon no longer carried the same influence. People had seen too much. They had connected too many pieces. Trust, once damaged, is difficult to restore. A month later, I made a decision regarding the money that had been tied to the celebration. Several relatives assumed I would use it for another event. Others thought I would simply keep it. Instead, I met with a financial advisor and established an educational fund for Lily. The account would help support her future college expenses and professional goals. It was structured carefully so the funds would benefit her directly when the time came. When I told Lily about it, tears filled her eyes. She hugged me tightly and thanked me over and over. I reminded her that the gift was never about a party. It was about her future. That conversation became one of my favorite memories. Not because of the money, because of the understanding behind it. For the first time since this entire situation began, I felt completely at peace with my decision. The celebration everyone spent months planning eventually took place in a much smaller form. Family members gathered. Photographs were taken. Lily smiled. Life moved forward. And that was exactly how it should have been. Looking back, I realized the event itself had never been the true source of my pain. Being excluded hurt. Being lied about hurt. But what hurt most was discovering how easily some people assumed my generosity could be separated from my humanity. They wanted the support without the relationship. The contribution without the respect. In the end, that was the lesson nobody forgot. One cool autumn evening, several months later, I sat on my back porch watching leaves drift across the yard. The sky glowed with shades of gold and orange. Inside the house, family photographs covered the walls. Some were old. Some were recent. This time, I was present in all of them. My phone buzzed with a message from Lily sharing news about a school achievement. A few minutes later, Daniel called to check on me. Ordinary moments. Simple moments. The kind of moments that quietly rebuild what was nearly lost. As I looked across the peaceful neighborhood, I understood something important. I never canceled a party because I wanted revenge. I withdrew my support because I finally understood my own value. And once I stopped allowing other people to decide how much respect I deserved, everything changed. Not only for me, but for everyone around me. The money was never the real gift. The real gift was learning that dignity should never come with conditions. And from that day forward, neither did mine.